Lord of the Rings trading card game provides 2 or more players with the same challenges that Frodo Baggins faced on his fateful journey from Hobbiton to Mount Doom to destroy the One Ring. As you guide your ring bearer on their adventure, you will play cards from your hand to help them, representing the good free peoples of Middle-earth. Companions, possessions, artifacts, allies, conditions, and events will all support and defend the Fellowship. But with each card played, you risk drawing the attention of the forces of Shadow, and your opponent will use this to play minions such as orcs, trolls, or Nazgul to try and kill, corrupt, or ensnare your ring bearer. They will be supported by their own evil possessions, conditions, and events. Beware, and keep their dark powers from growing too numerous. Successfully fend them off, and you can continue advancing on your quest. After your turn, you switch roles. Your opponent will have their own ring bearer to guide on their own quest, and it will then be your turn to play shadow minions in an effort to kill them or stymie their advancement. You and your opponent will swap roles back and forth multiple times over the course of a game, as you race ever closer to Mount Doom. If your ring bearer survives to the end of their journey at the 9th site, you claim a win for the Free Peoples, unless of course you eliminate the other ring bearer and recapture the One Ring, and instead claim a victory for Shadow. While there are many types of cards, they all share the same general structure. Cards come in 2 main types, Free Peoples and Shadow. Free Peoples cards represent the forces of good, and have a light-colored circular field in the upper left corner. During your turn, you play and use your Free Peoples cards. Shadow cards represent the forces of evil and corruption, and have a dark-colored diamond-shaped field instead. During your turn, your opponent plays and uses shadow cards to try to hinder or even defeat you. These 2 main kinds of cards, Free Peoples and Shadow, are further divided into several types, such as companions, minions, and events. Most cards are part of a specific culture. The icon in the upper right corner indicates which culture the card is a part of. The twilight cost of the card is found in the top left corner, next to their title and subtitle. If a card is unique, it will have a dot in its card title. This means that there can only be one card of that name in play at a time for that player. Unique or not, no card can be played to replace another card in play, even if they have the same title. Below the art is the type and subtype of the card. Along the left of the text box are some stats. These values will be used during skirmishes and other various situations. In the lower right is the collector's info, which acts as a unique ID that can be used when looking up the card, regardless of language. Specific card types will be explained further when they are relevant for the phase. The Lord of the Rings trading card game is normally a 2-player game, but it can support multiple additional players. For this rules video, we will be going over examples for a standard 1v1 game. To set up the game, each player first puts their adventure deck and draw deck nearby. The adventure deck contains site cards that represent locations in Middle-earth. Its cards will be picked out from the deck when appropriate. The draw deck contains an equal mix of Free People's cards to bolster your fellowship and shadow cards to hinder your opponent's fellowship. You will draw your hand from the draw deck throughout the game. Normally, players will bid to go first, but for your first game you can randomly determine the first player. The player who will go first takes their Site 1 card from their adventure deck and puts it to the side horizontally to start and form the adventure path for all players. Site cards will be covered later, but for now simply take the card from your adventure deck that has a 1 in front of a tan compass in the top left corner. Each player then places a marker that represents their fellowship on this first site. Next, each player reveals their ring bearer and the One Ring that they will be using. Place the One Ring under your ring bearer with the left edge poking out. Many attachable cards will have their title and stats on the left side for just this purpose. Then, in player order, players select a starting fellowship from their draw deck to accompany their ring bearer. Any number of companions may be chosen, so long as their total twilight cost is 4 or less. Most decks will have a recommended starting fellowship, which you should follow until you are comfortable with the rules of the game. Finally, players shuffle their draw decks and draw 8 cards to form a starting hand. In a regular game, the game setup procedure has additional steps which we've glossed over, as these are better understood after other game concepts are explained. Game setup is now finished, and the first player proceeds to the first phase of the turn sequence. The first player acts as the Free People's player, and their opponent starts as the Shadow player. Each Free People's player takes their turn according to the following turn sequence. Turns are divided into phases. During any phase, players may play events or activate card actions keyed to that phase. Many phases also have automatic actions that occur at the end of the phase. During the Fellowship Phase, the Free People's player will play cards from their hand to improve their fellowship, and then move it forward to the next site along the adventure path. The Shadow player then has a Shadow Phase to play cards to hinder or halt the Fellowship's progress. Next is the Maneuver Phase, where both players may attempt to outwit their opponent with surprise tactics. Then comes the Archery Phase, where players with archers will attempt to thin the ranks of their opponent by firing arrows. Afterwards comes Combat, in which attackers and defenders will be paired and then fight one at a time. During the Assignment Phase, the Free People's player assigns companions to defend against attacking minions. Multiple skirmish phases then follow, one per skirmish assignment, where each player can also perform skirmish actions to tilt the odds in their favor, with the winner of each skirmish wounding or killing the loser. Finally, after all skirmishes have resolved, we have the Regroup Phase. The Free People's player must make a choice. Move the Fellowship to the next site, where the surviving minions will follow and possibly gain reinforcements from the next Shadow Phase, or to end the turn, wiping out all minions and switching roles with their opponent. This video will go over each phase in order, and cover the different card types when they are relevant for the phase. The first phase in a turn is the Fellowship Phase. During this phase, you may perform Fellowship actions, including playing most Free People's cards, after which you will move your Fellowship forward along the adventure path. There are several types of cards representing different ways to bolster your Fellowship. These include companions, allies, possessions, conditions, and more. Let's go over each of these. A companion is a Free People's character that is in your Fellowship, traveling with the Ring Bearer and offering both additional protection and increased attention. Some companion cards have a signet, found in the lower left corner of the card. Cards with the same signet generally give bonuses to each other and work well in the same deck. To play a companion during the Fellowship Phase of your turn, you simply put it on the table in the same row near the other members of your Fellowship already in play. When you do this, add the Twilight cost of the companion, which is found in the top left corner, to the Twilight pool equal to the number. If the companion has any additional costs or requirements listed in its game text, those must be fulfilled as well. The Twilight Pool is an area of the table where Twilight tokens are placed. The tokens in the Twilight Pool represent how dangerous the world is for the Fellowship. Black glass beads are typical for Twilight tokens, but any distinct tokens in a large supply will do. There is no limit to the amount of Twilight you can add to the pool, but be warned. These Twilight tokens will be used later in the turn by your opponent to pay for their shadow cards. You cannot have more than 9 total companions in play, alive or dead, so choose your companions wisely. This restriction is known as the Rule of 9. Allies have a similar card structure to companions and are played from hand and paid for the same way. However, allies represent characters that help your companions from afar, and thus do not move with or are considered part of the Fellowship. They are played and kept in a separate row of cards on the table, in an area known as your support area. Over the course of the game, your characters will take wounds, represented by red tokens, which we will explore in further detail later on. During the Fellowship Phase only, there is one action always available to you known as Discard to Heal. If you have a unique companion or ally on the table, and the same character in your hand, ignoring the subtitle, you may discard the one in your hand to remove one wound from the one on the table. Possessions and artifacts, together colloquially referred to as items, are weapons, suits of armor, or other kinds of items used by a character. Artifacts work the same way as possessions, but are typically more powerful and correspondingly harder to remove. Both are played from hand in the same way as other Free People's cards we have seen thus far, but most are put into play under a character, with the left edge of the card visible for its card title and any attribute bonuses. Bonuses on the item can modify the character's stats, sometimes as part of the game text, but usually as a permanent bonus shown on the appropriate stat icon on the left-hand side for convenience. Some items play to your support area. If they do, put them into play in the same row alongside any allies you may already have, below the Fellowship. A condition is a card representing a significant change in the world, and it stays in play until discarded. These are played in the same way as other Free People's cards during this phase. Like items, conditions can be played on other cards, but most play to your support area. Remember that Free People's cards that are not events are always played during the Fellowship Phase, even if they provide a special ability that is used during a different phase. Additionally, during this phase, and in fact in all phases, you may play phase events from your hand. or use phase special abilities on cards you already have in play. For this phase, these actions are marked in bold with the word Fellowship, followed by a colon and the effect of the action. These will be explained in detail in the Events and Actions section. At the end of your Fellowship phase, when you are finished performing actions, your Fellowship then moves forward to the next site on the adventure path. The adventure path is shared between all players, and their player markers will move along them over the course of the game. When moving, if there is no site to move to, your opponent will choose one from their adventure deck. Site cards are horizontal cards that represent locations in Middle-earth that Fellowships adventure through. The site's number is found in the top left. This will be a number from 1 to 9, and is used to pick what next site to bring into play. The site's shadow number is in the top right, and represents the danger Fellowships will face when moving through this area. A Fellowship that survives the 9th and final site is the winner. When moving, place your player marker on the next site on the adventure path. If there is no site there yet, as is the case for the first player in the first turn, then a new site must be played from the shadow player's adventure deck. Place new sites in ascending order by their site number. So when the first player moves for the first time, their opponent will play their site number 2 from their adventure deck. Next, add tokens to the Twilight pool equal to the shadow number of the site you move to, which is its number in the top right corner on a black orb. In addition, for each companion in your Fellowship, you must add 1 token to the Twilight pool. So for example, when this player moves onto Brigate at the end of their Fellowship phase, they add 2 Twilight tokens for the site itself, plus 3 additional Twilight tokens for all of their members of their Fellowship, for a total of 5 tokens. Remember that allies are not a part of your Fellowship, so they do not count for the amount of tokens that you must add to the Twilight pool. After the Fellowship has successfully advanced and all Twilight tokens have been added, the turn proceeds to the Shadow Phase. In the Shadow Phase, your opponent will spend the Twilight tokens in the Twilight pool to play shadow cards and perform shadow actions, with the goal of hindering or even killing your Fellowship. As the Free People's player played companions, your opponent, the Shadow player, will instead play minions. Minions have the same layout as Free People's characters. However, on the bottom left of the card, minions have a unique additional stat on a compass icon known as their site number. When a minion is at a site whose number is lower than its own site number, that minion is considered roaming. For example, a minion with a site number of 3 would be roaming if played at a site 2 or 1, and not roaming at site 3 or higher. When playing minions, as with all shadow cards, the shadow player must remove Twilight tokens from the Twilight pool equal to the minion's Twilight cost. If playing a roaming minion, they must also pay a roaming penalty, by removing an additional 2 Twilight tokens from the pool. Once played, the minion is played to the center of the table, across from the active Fellowship. Shadow artifacts, possessions, and conditions state in their game text where they are played, and otherwise function just like their Free People's counterparts. These cards do not have any roaming penalties, but still pay for their cost out of the Twilight pool. Here's an example of a Shadow Phase. During the Fellowship phase, 7 Twilight tokens were put into the Twilight pool by the player playing Free People's cards and advancing along the adventure path. After the completion of the Fellowship phase, the Shadow player begins their Shadow Phase. They first play Orc Hunters, removing 3 Twilight tokens from the Twilight pool. They check the site number, and since it's higher than their opponent's current site, it is considered roaming, so they must pay an additional 2 Twilight tokens to play the minion as a roaming penalty. Next, they play an Orc Scimitar, a shadow possession, by removing 1 Twilight token from the pool. This possession says that its bearer must be a Sauron Orc, so they put it underneath the Orc Hunters. This possession will increase the strength of the minion by 2, and has an additional action that can be performed during the Skirmish Phase. Finally, the Shadow player plays Gleaming Spires Will Crumble, a condition that costs 1. The condition says to play to the support area, so the Shadow player plays it to theirs. The Shadow player has additional Orc Hunters in their hand, but since there are not enough Twilight tokens in the Twilight pool to play them, they cannot pay for their Twilight cost. There are no further actions that they can or wish to take, so they announce that they end their Shadow Phase. During the Fellowship phase, it's important to consider the amount of Free People's cards you choose to play. While you are able to play as many Free People's cards as you have in your hand, it will give the Shadow player many Twilight tokens to spend on Shadow cards during the upcoming Shadow Phase. When the Shadow player decides they are done with their Shadow Phase, the turn advances to the Maneuver Phase. Alternatively, if there are no minions in play at the end of the Shadow Phase, then skip directly to the Regroup Phase. During the Maneuver Phase, players may perform maneuver actions. or in other words use abilities on cards following the bolded word maneuver, or any events with that keyword. In this phase, as in all phases, actions are performed using a process known as the action procedure. The action procedure involves all players in turn taking a single action or passing. The Free People's player gets the first opportunity to perform an action, and then the Shadow player gets a chance, then the Free People's, and so on back and forth. If a player does not wish to perform an action, they may pass. Once both players consecutively pass, the window to take action ends and gameplay proceeds on. Passing is not permanent. If you pass once, you can later take an action in the same sequence. But if your opponent also passes, you miss your chance to do so. When all players consecutively pass during the maneuver phase, the phase is over, and the archery phase begins. In the archery phase, players take turns performing archery actions according to the action procedure, and when each player has passed, they perform archery fire. Archery fire is conducted by counting up the number of characters with the archer keyword on each side, which makes up the fellowship archery total and minion archery total. Every character with the archer keyword contributes 1 to their respective side. Additional card effects may also add or subtract from the final tally. In this example, the Shadow player has 2 minions with the archer keyword, and no other cards to add to this total, so the minion archery total this phase is 2. The Free People's player has no cards with the keyword, or anything that adds to it, so the Fellowship Archery total for this phase remains 0. After both sides have been counted, players choose how the opposing archery fire lands on their Fellowship or minions. First, assign wounds equal to the minion archery total to your companions and any participating allies in any way you wish. Afterwards, pick a Shadow player to assign wounds equal to the Fellowship Archery total to their minions in any way they wish. Wounds are assigned 1 at a time, so a character cannot have more wounds assigned than their total vitality, which is the number under the red orb. If any character has wounds equal to their vitality, that card is immediately killed. Killed minions go to the discard pile, but companions and allies instead go to the dead pile. Once dead, a unique companion or ally is permanently dead, and no further copies of that character may be played by that player. Minions are not so easily dealt with, and may return over and over in later turns no matter how many times they are killed. After each player has finished assigning archery wounds, if there are no minions left, the turn skips to the regroup phase. Otherwise, the turn proceeds to the assignment phase. During the assignment phase, the Free People's player assigns their companions to defend against any minions in play. Once all assignments are complete, each companion that was assigned to a minion will fight it, and lead to a separate skirmish phase for each. By default, the Free People's player cannot assign more than 1 minion to the same companion. After the Free People's player has run out of companions, the Shadow player may assign any leftover unassigned minions, and these minions may be assigned to any companion the Shadow player wants, including those that were already assigned minions. For example, this player starts their assignment phase facing 3 Goblin Runners. The Free People's player assigns a companion to 2 of the Goblin Runners, but cannot assign the extra minion as they have no more companions in play, and no effects that let them do so. Now that they are done, the Shadow player assigns the leftover Goblin Runner to the Ring Bearer, who is now in trouble. Once all assignments are complete, we now proceed to the first Skirmish Phase. The Free People's player chooses one of the remaining unresolved skirmish assignments, and for those characters, a skirmish phase now begins. During each skirmish phase, each player may perform skirmish actions, according to the action procedure. Once all players pass, the strength stat of each side is totaled, and the skirmish is resolved. The high strength wins, and inflicts 1 wound on each of the losers. Once finished, the Free People's player chooses the next pending assignment to resolve. This continues until there are no unresolved skirmishes left. For example, in this skirmish between Aragorn and 2 Orc ambushers, Aragorn's strength of 8 is lower than the combined total of the 2 Orc ambushers, which is 10. So in the resolution of this skirmish, Aragorn would take a wound. If there is an exact tie in strength between both sides, the Shadow side wins. So if Aragorn instead faces 2 Goblin Bowmen, it's an exact tie of 8 versus 8. Aragorn still loses and takes a wound. If the total strength of one side is at least double the total strength of the other side, the losing characters are overwhelmed. When a character is overwhelmed, that character does not take any wounds on resolution, they simply die. So if Aragorn was facing 2 Orc Inquisitors, their combined total of 18 strength is more than double his strength of 8, so he would be considered overwhelmed and killed regardless of his remaining vitality, going straight to the dead pile. Whenever a card leaves play for any reason, be it from being killed in a skirmish or discarded from a card effect, all cards attached to or stacked on that card are discarded. Additionally, any tokens on that card are removed. It's important to remember that each individual skirmish has its own action procedure to play skirmish actions. Following the resolution of all skirmishes, the turn proceeds to the regroup phase. During the regroup phase, the shadow player reconciles their hand. Then, the Free People's player decides whether to end their turn or move again. The regroup phase starts with both players activating any regroup actions with the usual action procedure. Once both players pass, the shadow player reconciles their hand back to 8 cards. When reconciling, you first have the option of discarding 1 card if desired, and then you draw back up to 8 cards. If, even after discarding, that player has more than 8 cards in their hand, they must instead discard until they have only 8. Afterwards, the Free People's player must choose one of the following, either moving their fellowship forward, or reconciling their hand and ending the turn. If the Free People's player chooses to advance, they move their fellowship to the next site, following the same movement process as before. However, double or triple moving this way during the regroup phase skips the fellowship phase and goes straight to another shadow phase, meaning the fellowship must be very well prepared to risk the enemy reinforcements. In addition, any unspent twilight in the twilight pool remains, and the new move will only add more to it. If the Free People's player instead chooses to end their turn, they first reconcile their hand back to 8 in the same way that the shadow player does. Then, the shadow player discards all minions in play, but not any shadow cards in the support area, and prepares to start their own turn as the new Free People's player, by first emptying the twilight pool and then beginning with their fellowship phase. During each of your turns, your fellowship must move at least once, and may move an additional number of times up to your move limit. Normally, the move limit is 2. Once during fellowship, and at most once during a regroup phase, but this limit can be altered by card effects. Play continues in this way turn by turn until a player makes it to Site 9, and has their ring bearer survive all skirmish phases. Once achieved, that player wins the game. Of course, if instead the ring bearer dies or is corrupted, that player is eliminated, and their opponent claims a shadow victory. An event is a card representing an important occurrence. It is played from hand and usually discarded after its effect happens. Most event cards have a phase action that defines when you may play that card from hand. The game text on that event may be performed only once for each copy of that event played. You cannot play an event during a phase that does not match its phase action. Discard an event after you play it, and before the next action is taken. Even after being discarded, events often have ongoing or delayed effects until the end of the phase, or until a specified phase or condition is met. The word spot is present on many cards, and sets up a requirement for playing a card or using a special ability in conjunction with a noun, such as to play spot an elf. This is equivalent to an elf must be in play and active for you to play this card. This means that if you're the Free People's player, you cannot spot your opponent's inactive elf, only those that are currently active and in play. Besides events, other types of cards may have a phase action as part of their game text called a special ability, which may be used only while the card is in play. The bold-faced word defines when you may do so. Each bold special ability is optional. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. You may use each special ability as many times as you like, even repeatedly during the same phase, as long as you meet the requirements for it and can afford to pay any costs associated. An action labeled with the word response is not considered a phase action. A special ability or event labeled with the word response indicates that you may perform that action whenever the trigger described in its game text happens. These can appear as part of game text on events or other kinds of cards. Take the card Intimidate as an example. The response trigger is if a companion is about to take a wound. This can be a wound from any source, since the card does not specify. An archery wound, a skirmish wound, or a wound from another card's effect. When the wound is about to be placed, declare you would like to respond with Intimidate by placing it on the table from your hand. The costs of Intimidate must be paid, meaning you add 2 Twilight tokens to the pool and you spot Gandalf. Once paid, you can now reap the event's effect, and prevent the wound from being placed. Afterwards, place the spent event in your discard pile. If for any reason you are unable to fulfill both costs, that being adding Twilight and spotting Gandalf, you cannot play the event, and your response does not happen. Sometimes you will be instructed to exert a character as part of a card action. Exertion represents strain and effort, which depletes vitality much like being wounded does, so you place one wound token on that character to represent this. Exerting a character is considered different from wounding a character, even though both require placement of the same token. Thus, cards that prevent wounds cannot prevent exertions, and vice versa. Once a wound token is placed, whether from exerting or from wounding, they are treated the same for all purposes, and can't be healed by any effect that would heal a wound. A character is considered exhausted when they have only one vitality remaining. No player may exert a character who is already exhausted, or in other words, you cannot exert a character to death. If something instructs you to exhaust a character, it means to exert that character as many times as you can, bringing it to one vitality. An ally is a character that helps your fellowship from afar, but does not move with them. Ally cards have a home site number indicated on the same line as the card's type. These home site numbers all refer to adventure paths from the Fellowship block, Tower block, and King's block sets of cards. Allies have no home sites on adventure paths from the Shadows expansion set onward. You may play allies and use abilities on them at any site. You do not have to wait until your fellowship is at their home site to do so. However, allies normally do not participate in archery fire and skirmishes, unless the fellowship has brought the fight to their home site. This doesn't mean that such an ally must take archery wounds or be assigned to a skirmish, only that the ally is eligible to do so like any companion if the fellowship is at their home site. Both Free Peoples and Shadow players may assign minions to skirmish an ally if eligible. One Free People's character always begins the game as your ring bearer. They bear the One Ring for you, just as when Frodo carried the ring in his pocket or on a chain around his neck. The ring bearer cannot be discarded or returned to your hand. The One Ring card represents the uniquely powerful item that is the focus of the story of The Lord of the Rings. In the middle of the card, the One Ring has a subtitle. It has no Twilight cost and its card type is the One Ring. While structurally it's similar to other cards you have seen, the One Ring is not considered a Free People's card or a Shadow card. There are different versions of the One Ring, but most have a response special ability that helps their ring bearer avoid death. For example, the Ruling Ring's responsibility allows its bearer to prevent a wound, replacing it with a burden instead. It can be used during any skirmish phase, even one that does not involve your ring bearer. A burden is a type of token, often using the same token as Twilight, that is placed on your ring bearer. There are many cards that add or remove burdens, but burdens are only placed on your ring bearer. If your ring bearer ever has burdens equal to their resistance, listed either in the game text or as a stat on a black orb icon, they succumb to the temptations of the ring and are considered corrupted, losing you the game. Many Shadow cards benefit from burdens as well, so you will need to manage your ring bearer's resistance carefully. When you optionally use the special ability on the One Ring, your ring bearer is considered to be wearing the ring. Once activated, you cannot normally take the ring off, and the special ability continues to be in effect until the Regroup Phase, when the ring is taken off automatically. It's important to note that your ring bearer cannot put on the ring to save themselves from being overwhelmed. When the ring bearer is overwhelmed, they are killed instantly, meaning there are no wounds applied to be converted into burdens. While wearing the ring, your ring bearer can perform all normal actions, such as moving and skirmishing. They may also defend against attacking minions as usual. There are, however, special Shadow cards with powerful effects that can only be played while your ring bearer wears the ring. There are many versions of Sam that have a special ability that is a response action you may use when Frodo is killed, but not corrupted. If Sam is in play at that moment, his special ability allows you to transfer the ring to Sam, and then he becomes your ring bearer, inheriting all advantages and disadvantages. Possessions and artifacts that are borne by characters have a subtype referred to as an item class. Each character may bear one possession or artifact of each class at one time. Thus, a character may bear only one hand weapon, only one ranged weapon, only one armor, only one cloak, and only one staff. Some possessions do not have a class. There is no limit to the number of possessions without a class that a character may bear. Additionally, some cards use the term mounted in game text, which means bearing a possession with the class of mount. You may transfer an artifact or possession between your Free People's characters that may bear it during your Fellowship phase, by paying the Twilight cost for that artifact or possession again. Minions cannot transfer artifacts or possessions. As a reminder, when a character is killed, all of their attached possessions go to the discard pile, regardless if the killed character is a companion and is going to the dead pile. Followers are Free People's cards that represent help for your Fellowship that join for a short time before departing. Followers are not members of your Fellowship, and they are not considered allies nor companions. A follower is played to your support area during the Fellowship phase, with its cost added to the Twilight pool like other Free People's cards in this phase. While your follower is in your support area, it has no effect on the game. However, each follower has the bolded keyword aid, which you can use to transfer that follower to one of your companions. When your follower is born by a companion, that follower will provide an ongoing effect or special ability that may then be used. A companion may bear more than one follower. If that companion is killed, all of its followers are discarded, just like other cards born by that companion. During the Regroup phase, when the Free People's player reconciles and minions are discarded, each follower is transferred back to the support area at no cost. Follower cards have a gold circle in the upper left to remind you to return them to the support area. In later turns, that follower may again be transferred to a companion, the same one or a different one, using the previously mentioned procedure. Threats represent imposing danger, hardship, or poor morale that comes to the fore when a companion is killed. A threat is a token placed on the dead pile by the Free People's player. The same tokens that are used for wounds can be used for threats. There are many cards that add or remove threats, much in the same way that burdens are added or removed. However, there is a hard limit to the number of threats that may be accumulated, which is equal to the number of companions you have alive in play. For example, if you have only 4 companions in play, only 4 threats can threaten you, and no more can be added. When a companion or ally is killed and placed in the dead pile, the Free People's player counts the number of threats on their dead pile and then removes them. Then, the Free People's player must assign a number of wounds equal to the number of threats removed to their companions in any way they wish. Similar to Archery Fire, these wounds are assigned one at a time. Some cards will reference controlling and liberating sites. This is a mechanic added in the Tower's block of cards that represents the enemies of Middle-earth occupying or overrunning key locations. However, this isn't permanent, because some cards can later liberate those sites, freeing it from the forces of evil. When an effect instructs to take control of a site, take the lowest number uncontrolled site in the site path and put it in that player's support area. If an effect instructs to liberate a site, that player takes the highest numbered site that player controls, if any, and puts it back on the site path where it was before. Sites can only be controlled once the fellowships of both players have passed them by, and each site can only be controlled by one player at a time. Controlling a site doesn't give any inherent benefits, but many shadow cards want to spot controlled sites, or stack other cards on them for benefits in card effects. The earlier game setup section provided a shortened version of the full game setup rules, which omitted certain steps for simplicity of setup for first-time players. The full game setup procedure has additional steps to determine which player goes first. Normally, to determine who goes first, players place secret bids in the form of burdens. Each player secretly bids a number of burdens, and you may bid 0 if you would like to. When all players are ready, simultaneously reveal the bids. Winning the bid earns you the right to choose whether you go first or second, or effectively whether you want to start as Free People's or Shadow. Win or lose, all players' bid are then added to each respective player's ring bearer. If there are any ties, then the tied players revert to resolving randomly who wins the bid. After playing starting fellowships and drawing a hand of 8 cards, players also have the option of taking a mulligan. After inspecting their opening hand of cards, players may opt to shuffle that hand back into their deck and draw 6 cards. You may not mulligan more than once. Following the release of Set 11, the Shadow expansion, the Lord of the Rings TCG had major rules changes to how sights and resistances work, among other minor rules. If players are playing with cards from these sets or in a specific format that uses this rule set, they should adhere to the following changes. Sights from the Shadow expansion set and onward have a dark compass in the upper left corner. This differentiates them from sights found in previous sets. During game setup, players largely follow the same full game setup procedure as described in the prior section. However, instead of the first player putting Sight 1 to start the adventure path, the first player chooses any sight from their adventure deck to begin the adventure path for all players. During regular play at the end of the Fellowship phase, when your Fellowship is moving to a site that has not yet been played, the Shadow player similarly picks any site from their adventure deck and puts it into play on the adventure path. Even though it has no printed number, it is still considered to have the next consecutive site number on the adventure path as its site number, for the purposes of card and game effects. Additionally, it also takes on a region number. Sites 1 to 3 are in Region 1, sites 4 to 6 are in Region 2, and sites 7 to 9 are in Region 3. You may play a copy of a site on the adventure path even if an opponent's copy was already played as an earlier site. These copies are treated as different sites, with each given a different site number. As previously explained, each time your Fellowship moves to a new site, you must add Twilight tokens to the Twilight pool for its site number and each companion in your Fellowship. In the Shadow Block rule set, there are instead 3 factors that determine how many Twilight tokens to add. First, add the number of Twilight tokens indicated by the shadow number of the site you're moving to. Then, add 3 Twilight tokens if you're in Region 2, or 6 Twilight tokens if you are in Region 3. Finally, add 1 Twilight token for each companion in your Fellowship. Companion cards in the Shadow set and onwards have a printed resistance value below their vitality instead of a signet. This number represents a companion's ability to withstand the lure of the One Ring. Some characters have a ring around their resistance icon. This means they can be chosen to begin the game as your ring bearer. Companions preceding the Shadows expansion set, other than versions of Frodo or Sam, do not have their resistance printed on the card, but are still considered to have a resistance of 6. Allies are considered to have a resistance of 0. Each burden on your ring bearer reduces the resistance of every companion in your Fellowship by 1. Like in the older rule set, if your ring bearer's resistance is reduced to 0, they are corrupted and you lose the game. If the resistance of any of your other companions is reduced to 0, there is no immediate penalty, though your opponent may play shadow cards to take advantage of this compromised status. Cards can have keywords in bold that shorten some common game effects. Most keywords are known as unloaded keywords, that have no special rules themselves but may be referenced by other cards, such as Ranger, Knight, Tracker, or Spell. Keywords with rules are called loaded keywords. Here are some common loaded keywords. Fierce. Fierce only appears on minions. After all normal skirmishes have resolved, surviving Fierce minions must be defended against a second time, effectively doubling the resources that must be spent keeping the Fellowship alive. After the first set of normal skirmishes, players perform another assignment phase for the Fierce minions, and then complete a separate skirmish phase for each Fierce skirmish. An ally that was able to be assigned to a normal skirmish is also able to be assigned to a Fierce skirmish. Defender. The Defender keyword will be followed by a number. Characters with this keyword can be assigned additional unassigned minions up to the number. In other words, if your assigned companion has the keyword Defender +1, you may assign that character to 1 additional unassigned minion, so 2 total. Damage. The damage keyword will be followed by a number. When the winning side in a skirmish phase has 1 or more characters with the keyword damage +1, each losing character takes 1 additional wound for each damage +1. Damage +2 adds 2 wounds, and so on. This is called a damage bonus, which may stack and be added to or removed by various effects. Sanctuary. Sanctuary is a keyword found on site cards. A sanctuary is a place of rest where the Fellowship may remove some wounds if they stop and begin a Fellowship phase at that site. Post-Shadow set sites omit the keyword, and instead apply it automatically to any site 3 or 6. At the start of your turn when your Fellowship is at a sanctuary, you may heal up to 5 wounds from your companions, not allies, in any way you would like, or none at all. Initiative. Initiative is a term that some cards reference but is not considered a keyword. At any time, either one side or the other has initiative. The Free People's player is considered to have initiative when they have 4 or more cards in hand. Otherwise, the Shadow player has initiative. The Lord of the Rings trading card game has a few simple rules for building a deck. Broadly, you will need to put together at least 71 cards. A ring bearer bearing the one ring, a draw deck of at least 60 cards, and a 9-card adventure deck. You may choose any character with the ringed resistance icon or any pre-shadow set version of Frodo to be your ring bearer. You may choose any version of the One Ring. These 2 cards are not a part of your draw deck, so they do not count against your total of Free People's cards. Your draw deck must have at least 60 cards, and must have an equal number of shadow cards and Free People's cards shuffled together. You cannot have any copies of the One Ring or sights in your draw deck. You may have up to 4 copies of each card title, ignoring subtitles, in your draw deck. However, since 1 copy of your ring bearer is always a part of your starting fellowship, you may have only 3 copies of that character in your draw deck. Your adventure deck must have exactly 9 sight cards in it, and each sight must be different. The contents of your adventure deck depends on which game format you are playing. In movie-era formats like Fellowship, Towers, or King, sights must be in order from 1 to 9 and bear the symbol of that block, or no symbol in the case of Fellowship. In Shadow Sight Path formats where there are no sight numbers, your adventure deck may include no more than 3 sights that have the same given shadow number. While between one another, players may agree to play as they wish, at tournaments there are generally a handful of formats that are used which have their own set of rules for deck building. Some popular competitive formats are block formats, where cards only from a specific groups of card sets are allowed to be used. Other formats allow all sets, or from a specific era of the game's print run. Listed here are some popular formats of play. All of these formats typically have a list of banned cards that cannot be included in your tournament deck. As with all specifics, refer to your tournament organizer for details. This concludes the rules video. Linked to the description are rules and resources that should answer any further questions you may have, and card images to get started playing. Thanks for watching.